brand marketing, there are 12 classic archetypes or patterns in a brand story, and choosing the right one for your business, whether it's for your small business or a larger enterprise, making those right choices is going to be essential. And so today in this show, we are going to be reviewing the classic patterns in brand storytelling and look at how you can use these archetypes to create meaningful connection with your target audience. Don't go away. We will be right back. And a very hearty welcome to all of you. You're watching Beyond the Logo with Nancy Lockhart and myself, Bridgetti Banda. This live stream is made possible by StreamYard, Lockhart Marketing, and BeLive Media. So a special warm welcome to our audience, regardless of where you're watching us, whether it's over on Amazon Live, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter, or YouTube. Just a warm welcome. In today's show, we're going to be talking about how you use the 12 examples of archetypes to choose the best branding for your craft, the best branding for your business. And if it's your first time watching the show, we'd love to give you a shout out. So do let us know. On the show, we're all about helping you level up in your marketing endeavors. And something we always start the show with is just raising awareness of how important it is to look your best when you are appearing on camera. For example, I use the Logitech Brio camera. I recommend anything in the Logitech range. The Brio, for example, has got trademarked right light and HDR technology, which in simple English just means that you don't have to be a lighting expert, but it'll make you look great online. The other thing that we also like to highlight on the show, especially if you're using marketing, you're using video for marketing, you want to ensure that people, your target audience, can actually hear you. So I, for example, use the Samsung Logitech, but you don't have to use such a big microphone. You could use something as simple as a lavalier microphone, and what I recommend is the Rode lavalier. It's a great tiny little clip-on microphone, and they're pretty inexpensive, but it will make a huge difference to how people can hear you when you appear online and you're doing any kind of online marketing. There's lots of other things that we recommend. A lot of companies, one of the great ways that you can market your company, people just love. They love behind the scenes views of what you're doing in your day in the life of this department or that department. People thrive on stuff like that, and it will endear people to your brand. And the way that you do that is to use your mobile camera. You don't need huge setups. You don't need huge teams. You can use your mobile phone, and you could use something like a gimbal, for example. Put your phone on the gimbal in landscape mode. A quick tip for you guys: if you didn't know why you end up having a video with black lines on the side, it's simply because your phone is in portrait mode, not in landscape. You can let people see a lot more if your phone is in landscape mode, and show off your brand, product, services. Give people that behind the scenes view. They're absolutely going to love it. And now I can't wait to get my amazing co-host to join me on screen. Nancy Lockhart is the founder of Lockhart Marketing. She's a #1 best-selling author, and she's worked with some of the most iconic brands such as Target, Kaiser Permanente, Medtronic, and what she does is in the show, she leverages her knowledge of many, many years to help successful women and other business owners rebrand their businesses, become more profitable, successful, and purpose-driven. Nancy is also the executive advisor of the University of California, Santa Barbara Customer Experience Program. And with that, let me just say a huge big welcome to my co-host, Nancy. It's so good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Hello, everyone. I'm excited to talk today about our brand archetypes and storytelling and branding. So thank you once again for having the show, producing the show.
Absolutely. Now, I mean, when I got the information from you, I'm just going to put it out there. I knew nothing about this. This was new to me. This was brand new information to me. And I've been in business for many, many, many years, and I just thought, wow, this is interesting, because if I didn't know about it, there's going to be lots of other people there that didn't know either.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing is that you and I have written books together, and you have your own show specifically designed around books and storytelling. And I think one of the things that is really helpful for us as marketers is to kind of think outside the box and borrow from some of the other disciplines that are out there, different professions. But in this case, I think it's exciting because we're essentially telling the story of our brand and putting them in kind of the protagonist position. And once we can kind of define that, we start to understand who our target market is, who we can talk to about who we are, what we are, and really define who the brand is in a way that's maybe a little different, a little bit more creative, but also really relatable. So kind of borrowing some older forms of how to tell a story so that we can really communicate and connect with our audience is exciting. So I'm happy to share and excited to kind of walk through this with everybody. Bridgetti, your sound's off.
There we go. What people often say is, I don't have stories to tell. The truth, I think, is that we all have stories. We have loads of stories. And the problem is more that we don't know how to package those stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really important to know your brand story, because as we talk about often on the show, you want to be able to make an emotional connection with your target audience. And that's beyond just a product or service, but really bringing them in, meeting them, thinking of your brand as a person, and shaping the dynamics of a person who lives life and has experiences and, has their ups and downs and has a story arc. But even just setting up the character in what we're going to talk about today of your brand and how it relates to your target audience is really the start of telling that story and being able to communicate in a way that's really impactful.
I really like what you said there, and I think a lot of people may miss that point, that if you think of your brand as a person, the storytelling becomes easier because it's relatable to everyone, actually. It'll have an identity. And that's another interesting thing that I'd love to talk about sometime is the pros and cons of crafting your brand around yourself as a person, as opposed to the brand as a separate entity, and should they crisscross, when they should crisscross, and what are the risks, between the two. I think that would make an interesting topic sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great topic, and it's a interesting branding opportunity that I often come across. It's like saying, are you your brand, or is your brand separate from you? Either way, it's there's no right or wrong. It's just how you approach it and how you demonstrate what you want to communicate to your audience. So we'll certainly cover that topic.
Absolutely. I mean, you have people like Elon Musk, for example. He is his brand.
Absolutely. And sometimes without proper management, you can evolve to your brand. And probably the downside to that is if you decide to go and do something different than what your brand is, then you've kind of locked into that particular product, service, whatever you're delivering, or several products and services in the case of Elon Musk. But he is very closely associated to the brands that he has in his empire. So everything he does is connected to that. So
absolutely. Should we dive into our topic today?
Yes, let's dive right in. So today we're going to talk about brand archetypes, and really the archetypes are kind of the basis and the skeleton of telling your brand story. And this isn't a new idea. It really is a psychological psychiatrist type of endeavor that we're borrowing from, but it really developed through Carl Jung, who wanted to kind of start to understand different personality types. And what's interesting about these archetypes is that they cross over not through cultural, language, time, and in that theory, he kind of put forward there's these classic 12 types that we're going to talk about, which can help you to align, help you to communicate, but it also helps to tell the story and develop the story of your brand. So you often have your protagonist, which would probably be your brand, and then your antagonist, which is something that your brand is helping, a problem to solve. So if you think about the story in that way, and how you're telling it, how you're solving a problem for your target audience, but you really need to understand who your protagonist is, who your brand is in your story. And what we're going to talk about today is really defining who that is. And this is a little bit of, we're going to go through a lot of summary. And I think the important thing is when you're thinking about your brand, which one of these archetypes do you think your brand most aligns with? So let's dive right into those 12. So I know this is a lot. We're gonna try to go fast today, but I think you guys will get the idea. So there's these 12 different brand archetypes. And so each one we're gonna dive into. I've created a little icon for each one so that we can follow along appropriately. But these are, again, devised by Dr. Jung, and we'll just go to the next page and jump right into the first one, which is the innocent. So when you think about this, think about how your brand kind of may be positioned. Now, might be the innocent. Their desire sounds great. Love, peace, happiness. Goal is to make sure everything's happy, doing the right thing, always looking at life as the glass is half full, very optimistic, does not like deceit, complexity, punishment, or confusion. And some examples of this are Dove, the Dove soap, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, and Volkswagen. So you can, if you start to get an idea of what the brands are that are reflective of this type of archetype, you start to understand a little bit more about how they've communicated their messaging from this perspective. And so it probably will become more and more apparent as we get into some of the other archetypes that we're going to go over. So the next one.
I like that you included some of the brands, Nancy, because it gives people an idea of where they may be positioning themselves with the archetypes.
Yeah, I think it's you can talk about the different aspects of these archetypes, but trying to put it into like, okay, well, that sounds nice. And I might know a person that has that kind of attribute. But as we're talking about creating a persona for your brand, this is going to be really helpful. And then seeing how other brands have communicated in this way and kind of you can see how it aligns really helps to get us in the mindset of how we apply it to our own businesses. So the next one is the sage. And this is really, the sage is really about finding the truth, understanding, wisdom, just kind of this very solid knowledge space. The other traits would be expertise, information, influence. The things that it does not like or that it fears is this misinformation, lies, ignorance, inaccuracy, stupidity. And brands with the sage would be TED, Google, BBC, Discovery Channel. And to some extent, I think, Bridgetti, your brand is somewhat a sage, knowing you're searching for the truth. When you're doing the work that you're doing and making sure that those things are communicated effectively and authentically, and really demonstrating the wisdom of what to do and how to move forward. So I did kind of think, oh, Bridgetti's kind of the sage in that aspect of truth and wisdom.
One can kind of understand when you look at how the brands have positioned themselves and the reasons why they've positioned themselves follow that kind of art. Because if these brands were not trusted by their audience, it would be the downfall of their business. They absolutely have to remain true to it.
Yes. And oftentimes, you see here, there's a lot, these brands are very much in the communication space. And that's fine, well and fine, but you can communicate in different ways. You can be perhaps, we're going to talk about the Jester, where it's, kind of fun. But this is a very information, truth-based communication that these brands carry. And so it's very important for them to adopt those attributes of the sage per se, so that they are, maybe that's the protagonist and the antagonist is some kind of scandal or cover up, or something that's happening, and the sage is there to uncover the truth and provide glimpses into the solution.
So it's more sort of factual stuff. It's not your media for entertainment. This is factual information that people need to rely on.
Absolutely. And also to discover, because, a lot of this is about seeing something that you may not have seen or thought about in a new way. So, you think of TED Talks and how influential they are for, whether it's your business life or your personal life, and uncovering some new ways to look at things or approach things. And the next one is the explorer. So where you had the sage as being kind of a wise purveyor of information, this brand is really out to explore, to find out what's new, and to help guide their friends and target audiences along the way. So really, it also it includes this idea of excitement and fun, and how to take your own path and be your own person, and really embrace that. So discovery and adventure and pioneering. But on the other side, that those fears are aimlessness and conformity, safety. So there's a lot of things that's just like, to do something just to do it isn't at the heart of what the explorer is about. So you see brands like NASA, Jeep, North Face, National Geographic. So there's a depth to the explorer that isn't just, let's go take the path unknown, but let's go with a purpose and excitement and curiosity, which is exciting and fun.
I like that you explained that, because it's not just something random. It's something with a purpose. I thought that was quite an important point that you mentioned there. So thank you for that.
You bet. And that little icon, there is the exploring squiggly line, but there's also that focused magnifying glass that's like, I have a purpose and a direction that I'm going in. It may not be a straight line to find it, but there is direction that's associated with that.
Yeah, it's not mindlessly wandering on the forgotten path.
Exactly. Now, the next one is the outlaw. And oftentimes you would think, oh, I wouldn't want to be associated as the outlaw. But the outlaw has a little bit of a bad rap, but it's really about revolution, disruption, where the explorer is looking for something new, the outlaw has found it and has found the depth and the breadth of being in this particular space. So shaking things up, challenging people to do things differently, breaking rules. The fears are really conformity, repetition, rigidity, status quo, where, oftentimes that would be a key place for you to start to communicate to a target audience that wants to, I want to think differently about the world. So the brands are Harley Davidson, which has an incredible cult following. It really, that message resonates and has resonated. Initially it was, you had this idea of like these biker dudes and rebels, but you've got, middle-aged executives that are aligning so closely with that brand of like, I want to redefine myself. I want to be something different, not in a irreverent way, but in a way that really expresses their growth and their development. And so it can be, once again, a very exciting place for a brand to live in redefining, who they are. And I would want to point out, these different archetypes are not mutually exclusive. There's definitely crossover within different, the different archetypes. But I think it's important to understand that there is kind of, if you're wanting to tell and develop a story, there is a way to do that by choosing one that may have traits that are borrowed from different ones, but there's typically a primary archetype that tends to be identified with your brand.
So what you're saying is you can have crossovers between the different archetypes, but you'll have one that's kind of your main archetype that people will recognize you by.
Exactly, like a primary trait or character that rises to the top. Exactly. Yep. So the magician, again, this might have some negative connotations because you think of someone who's a con artist or someone who's trying to get away with something. But this really is, again, about shifting and thinking about redefining, turning your dreams and hopes into a reality, creating that magical experience, that awe-inspiring experience where you could see the outlaw may have some of that in that, like disrupting the status quo, but the magician is the one who's like, is the way to make it happen, to create that unique vision and to stand by it. So I think, it's really about this, it's more focused on the transformation versus the breaking free that the outlaw kind of has. So that experience, that imagination, that insight. And so the fears would be boring, repetition, doubt, ignorance. And again, you can see where there might be some crossover, but this is really about that ta-da moment. So you've got like Disney, Dyson, Polaroid, MAC Cosmetics, that transformation of one state into another state, and to give permission for that to be okay. Where sometimes it's like, I don't know if that will happen, but if your brand can really pay off on that transformation, then you've achieved that magician archetype in a very strong, emotionally connecting way.
I was just looking at these brands. I'm thinking, these are sort of, as you said, experiential, brands that offer you an experience that makes you better, makes you look better, feel better, want to do better.
Or your house look better with Dyson. Yes. Yep.
It really all about feelings, and having that sort of magic feeling. So it's not the kind of a bad magic or a spell or that kind of thing, but it's more about offering you a transformation from what you previously had, making you feel good.
Right. And once you can connect with that emotion of, like, I know when I think of Disney, I think of being a little girl. I was very girly, very into princesses. And I went to Disneyland or Disney World at the time. And I got to believe that could be a reality, that magical transformation, the castle, the rides, the characters, they all could be, it could be realized. And to this day, I know if I go to a Disney park, I'm going to feel, or see a Disney movie, that belief in that transformation and that magic is something that I know I'll experience.
Well, we can still be girly girls these days. I mean, if you look at what the makeup industry offers to you today, you can be anybody you want these days with makeup. I mean, it's the transformations that they offer you is magical.
It is. It's magical, and it's fun too. It's a lot of fun. So I really do. I do like the magician.
Absolutely. I think there's very few of us who don't.
I would agree with that too. So the hero is probably one of the ones we hear the most about. Like, you want your brand to be the hero of the experience. And I think that there can be very defined heroes in the space. Like, I'm talking about, site Nike, BMW, FedEx, where they've really solved the problem in connection with, whatever your target audience, that feeling that they're having, that is, they have a problem or situation that needs to be solved. And the hero is really about demonstrating that mastery, that excellence, that experience in solving those problems. And really being courageous in doing that, and creating a confidence within that, that relationship of the protagonist hero image. I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
I mean, when I look at the examples that you've got in here, for example, you kind of see that hero coming through, in their branding, how they've positioned themselves, and how people want to associate with these brands because of how it makes them feel.
Once again, it's really about that emotional connection. And if you have, say you've developed some new kind of service or application or a product that's really different, you can demonstrate that archetype as hero because you've clearly solved that problem. Now, what you have to really be sure of is making sure that that does solve the problem on many different aspects and ways with your product or service. So I would say the hero is more for probably a more established brand or product or service, and the way that you uniquely approach that problem solving. So, just being kind of an established, less rebellious, and more about, we've mastered the way to solve this problem. You can depend on us, and working with us will create that feeling of, oh, thank God I have them on my side.
Yeah. It's definitely kind of a trusted brand. If you think of each one of them, people trust them implicitly. It's when you mention the name, people's faces kind of light up because they know there's no ambiguity with regards to the brand, what it is they do, what they solve. Everybody knows who they are. It's been tried over a long period of time, and that's why he said it's more suited to an established brand.
Right. And also it often is a default archetype, if you will, that people say, well, I want my brand to be the hero. However, in going right there, you can miss some other opportunities to uniquely connect. So the hero is wonderful, and it is popular for a reason, why people go there without even knowing it's a story arc or character archetype. But I think it's important to understand when you're thinking about your brand, how you may, again, that crossover, that it doesn't have to mutually be exclusive, but if you're the hero, perhaps you're more of the outlaw, and the hero, there's hero elements within that. So just think creatively, but definitely the hero is popular for a reason. Next, we have the lovers, which is really about connection. You think of kind of that intimacy, which can be a very delicate space to go into, because you don't want to be intrusive or perverted in this type of positioning, but you really want to create that kind of very strong like connection. That is something like, how does your brand create that kind of that intimacy without being intrusive, I think.
Or creepy.
Creepy. Absolutely. So, when you think of the brands that I've cited, Victoria's Secret, Godiva, Chanel, I think I spelled that wrong. Channel. It's supposed to be Chanel, but that kind of, it's an aspirational connection that you're demonstrating with your product, that is really personal, but it's also very, it's very desirable. And doing that, it's a very delicate balance. Like, you don't want to be creepy, but you do want to create that, that connection into first love, and love makes the world go round, and that affectionate, kind of also indulgent, which sometimes, you get that with Godiva. Sometimes we limit ourselves from being indulgent in something that's good, but to give that permission for allowing ourselves to feel those feelings and embrace that. And if you can walk that fine line, then you've created that lover's connection. And it doesn't always have to be around a love situation, but having that intimate connection, that feel-good connection, is something that is really important for your brand. Then you've achieved a lover archetype. Again, you can be thinking of like the magician, a new way of doing something, but it's connecting you in a way that is very intimate, and something that almost gives you permission to feel good. That makes sense.
I must say I'm learning a lot from you today.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm always happy to bring some new thinking, ways to think outside of the box when it comes to our branding, and how we can really connect and communicate with our audiences and our target audiences.
Yeah. And I think, these are the sort of things that a lot of the bigger brands will know about because they've got huge, big marketing departments.
Mm-hmm.
But
right.
There's tons and tons of entrepreneurs out there and smaller businesses who doesn't have a big marketing department to advise them on this kind of thing. And so, I think that this kind of information is invaluable to somebody starting up a business, or they're in business, they need to ramp up their marketing. And these are things that are not generally known by people. You're so busy trying to run your business that you're not giving this kind of in-depth thought to your marketing process if you haven't had the right training.
Yeah.
So, wow.
Well, I'm glad to be able to bring this to our audience, because it is, you're right, there's an element of play almost when you're thinking about what is the story of my brand, and creating characters that will then play with your brand. Like, how am I going to position this? And we don't often give ourselves a lot of permission to play, like just to play. When I say play, I mean release ourselves into imagination, and to start to go like, okay, well, how would this feel, or how does this look? And it hits a lot of the topics that we've taught, the journey of people, the way, we position ourselves against current events. It's really let your brand play out, give yourself permission to take that time and space to, the operations and the day-to-day is always going to be there, but the way to stand out and build your unique brand, so let yourself kind of explore some of these ideas and concepts so that you can bring forward something that's unique, and something that you might intimately know solves a problem for a target audience. But in order to get there, you've got to be able to properly communicate what that solution looks like. So these are some suggestions for how to do that. So the next one is the jester. And I think I might be somewhat of a jester too. I enjoy life. I like having fun. And once again, it's that permission to allow your brand and your business to kind of play again. Like we were just saying, be playful, be fun, be entertained. And I do, this message of you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong, I think is a little harsh. It's more like, if you're not feeling good, let that be a way for you to kind of go, how can I get to feeling good? How does my brand help to get to feeling good, having fun. It might be a little bit more, less for a very serious, heady brand, but it is playful, humorous. It's positive. It's encouraging, and it's also bringing together that connectedness and being funny and kind of when your brand is something about letting yourself just be who you are. And for the silliness and the mistakes and the ups and the downs, it makes you very human and accessible, and certainly someone you want to invite to a party, right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So examples of that would be like Budweiser and Skittles and Old Spice. Like, there's a very avant-garde approach to how they're positioning those brands that make you chuckle, that make you happy, that make you, maybe take a mini vacation when you're seeing some kind of communication that comes from that brand that makes you feel really good and makes you feel happy and maybe chuckle a little bit. Certainly Old Spice has captured that with some of their more recent campaigns. And Skittles, Taste the Rainbow. It's very happy and joyful positioning of your brand.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was thinking about it as you're talking. All through those brands, when you think of interacting or engaging with brands, you think about stepping out of the seriousness of life for just a little bit, and
Right.
and having fun. That's what you associate with those brands. It's a fun experience. And so I definitely see how that fits in. But I do also see the covers with some of the other archetypes, because even with that, you want to be truthful in the experiences that you offer to people.
Right.
So I do see a crossover.
Yeah, I think that's also important to understand where what your product or service is. I mean, it may be very inappropriate for, say, legal services to take on a jester mentality. It's just that's not where you're going to capture, I think it would be a stretch to say, setting up your will we're going to have fun doing that. It's a bit of a stretch. Maybe you can do it, but it's probably not where people are going to build that trust. It's like, this isn't a time for play. This is a time for us to be serious, to understand, to trust, have that professional guidance. So, there's ways, all of these things, they sound wonderful, but you have to put it against the backdrop of your products and services, and then how you can connect effectively with your target audience. It's all about that emotional connection. So it's really thinking about what space that your product or service is in and what makes the most sense for that product or service.
I think, a lot of it revolves around giving careful thought to your brand and how you're positioning it. Because what you said makes a lot of sense. But I came across one or two people, for example, that's in the financial services industry. And the importance in that field is accuracy, trust.
Yes.
But I've seen how some people stepped outside of the box and brought in a huge fun element into learning financial literacy in a manner that no one else may have thought. Because you always think of financial literacy as something that's seriously pressing and not fun.
Yeah.
I really just want to do it because I have to do it. It's not a topic I want to talk about for fun. But I've seen somebody have so much fun with financial literacy. And so again, in that huge crossovers between them.
Yes. Well, I think, you bring up a really good point, because I think once you've established your credibility in a space like that, like financial services, there is a way to say, my target audience doesn't want to talk to me, but if I can include some element of, like, this isn't going to be as painful. Like, it is a way, again, if you're thinking strategically about, let's create the basic foundation of what we have to be credible. We have to trust, we have to create stability, and we can do it in a fun way. So I'm not saying it's about being smart and understanding your audience so you can bring in these elements. Again, there's something that always, well, typically rises to the top as far as these archetypes into what brands and what your brand and services are. But you can infuse different elements of this once you understand what your target audience, what their needs are, and what holds them back from engaging. So you're absolutely right. There are, you look at these types of these characters that are, we're talking about, and how we can borrow from all of these places. But again, there's typically a prominent archetype that comes forward for most brands. So the everyman, this sounds very boring, but honestly, it is a very relatable, trusted, someone that you can really feel very close connections very quickly. So they're very much about the belonging, the connection with others, being together in harmony. But also I think there's an ease to this that becomes, it's very easy to relate to these brands. When you think of, Ford and Levi's and IKEA, again, there's elements of different ones, different archetypes within these brands. But when you think of like dependable, accessible, trusted, something that can really, when you know what to expect when you go to IKEA, you know what to expect from a pair of Levi's jeans, you know what to expect from, Ford Tough. And so you can trust, it's a trust and an ease that I think is very important. That isn't boring, and it doesn't have to be boring. I mean, you walk into an IKEA, it is far from boring. It's lots of colors, but that you know what to expect. And that dependability is something that's very important to the core of those brands.
I was just thinking again as you're talking, these particular brands are also trusted and established. In other words,
yes.
They've proven themselves over a long period of time. So it'll be very difficult for you to position yourself as that archetype if you're a brand new business, because you haven't yet built that trust in your brand.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, but it is a different way. Like, say you've built that trust and you want to create that, that invitation that I can relate to you. I understand you. Let me, let's work. It's less of kind of a patriarchal and more of a, equals. Let's come together to solve your problem or to delight you or to what, so there's, again, different elements, but you're right. You really do have to have the credibility to own that everyman dependability connection theme. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So next is the caregiver. And this is very much about, really thinking about how do you care, protect, and nurture. So it has a very matriarchal kind of aspect to it, helping others, doing things for others, treating others as you would treat yourself. Really, this is about caring and reassuring. But I think the things that are important is, if your brand is going to take that, stake that claim, it's very important to not have any kind of selfishness, ingratitude, helplessness, neglect. It has to be, it's very dependable, very heart-centered. If you think of the brands I've cited here, UNICEF, Johnson & Johnson, Pampers, Volvo, this, you feel very, very trusted, caring, dependable, but there's a lot of heart center in there. There's a lot of that matriarchal, mom-centered emotion that comes with those brands, and the level of trust that's there.
Absolutely. I was looking at those names and I was thinking of, we had Ford in the other one, and now we've got Volvo. Both trusted brands, but for different reasons. Ford is
Exactly.
your reliability. And it doesn't mean that Volvo isn't reliable. It is a very reliable car, but it's positioned itself as going the extra mile in caring for the passenger, for the person, the
Yes.
driver.
Yep.
So
The
it's
whole
just,
safety concept. Yep. Yeah, it is. It's just it's nuance, but it helps to create that distinction between those two automotive. I can talk industries and it's great because it helps the car buyer to go, what's important to me? I'm going to be looking at this brand because understanding what is important for me, the end user. But it's really the job of the brand to go, what are we about? What problems do we solve? What does our target audience care most about? For Volvo, it's maybe different than Ford. And by the way, you can have a Volvo and a Ford in your driveway, in your garage, because again, these are not mutually exclusive. And you may use your Ford truck to off-road and your Volvo to take your kids to school.
absolutely. It doesn't mean that the one's less than the other.
No.
It just fulfills a different need.
Right. A different emotion, a different connection, and being able to create that uniqueness. Wow, that's really powerful for your brand.
And so on to our next one.
The next one is the ruler. And the ruler, again, some of these have some negative connotations because you think of, the desire to have control, but oftentimes you want to have a brand that has control, that leads and creates this sort of an exclusivity, a uniqueness about them that is very powerful, very trusted. But this also has an element of luxury, wealth, that is is part of that brand. So it's not about being, like the Harley Davidson and the outlaw. It's really about this elegance and this sophistication that's associated with it, that brings it to the top, that communicates this leadership aspect of it. So you have brands like Microsoft, Rolls-Royce, Rolex, Hugo Boss. So you have these, where Microsoft may not be like considered premium or luxury brand. It is very much it is a leader in its industry, and it has developed products and services and redefined categories. And you look at Rolls-Royce, Rolex, Hugo Boss, you have this elegance, this luxury brand, but it truly is, once again, it's about having a believable archetype that's associated with your brand. And in this one, again, it's about, there's an experience level that creates that trust. And you can easily connotate it and connect it with these brands and these, traits and strategies and messaging. So this is really about a stable leadership type of a brand, and oftentimes luxury.
It's an interesting one for me because it's not so much that the brand may position themselves as being a leader. That may have been their intention, but it's not just about them positioning themselves as a leader. They're also recognized by the people who buy from them
Yes.
as the leader. So in other words, their positioning was spot on because their audience, their target market, has given them that kind of recognition that they desired.
That's an excellent point. It really is, again, knowing how what does your target audience want, and being able to shape that. And if they want luxury and leadership and kind of this elegance, being able to create that, to reflect back. There's often this term foils in storytelling, where it is a reflection back of the traits. So what you're describing is the target audience is the foil that reflects back. Not only are we positioning ourselves as a ruler, but you see us and reflect that back as, as a leader, as, we've earned this elegance and this, this kind of royal perception, if you will. So that's a great point with this particular archetype. And then this is our final one, the creator, which is really, there's a lot of elements in some of the, the magician, the ruler, the caregiver. There's a lot of that kind of baked into this, but this is really about being very disciplined about creating a perfect product, service, or experience. There's a lot of innovation that is baked into this particular archetype. You think one of the brands is Apple, and their whole like brand positioning is think different, and obviously that's a big statement to be thinking about how to do things differently, but also be consistent and have that established perception of being creative to solve problems and to be able to give permission to think differently. Be really original, expressive, have vision, and really be thinking outside of the box. So this fear of duplication, stagnation, that's very counterintuitive to this particular archetype. It really is. You want to talk about that play aspect, to be able to play with what is a problem, how do we solve it? So when you look at the brands, Apple obviously has continued to redefine how we learn, how we access information. Lego, GoPro, these are all different ways to play, different ways to stimulate your creativity. And it's interesting because it continues to build upon itself. It's like a wave that continues to get bigger and bigger. GoPro, it's one of those things where you're like, why didn't I think of that? Why didn't I think about mounting a camera on my head and taking a ride and seeing, presenting something from my perspective, from the user perspective. So it's really kind of it's fun, but it also has to have that perception of, trust and establishment, but not too established that you can't still get creative. It's like building upon itself, if that makes sense.
The word I was thinking of, as you were describing it, is that all these brands kind of have an iterative process in which they remain at the top of their game. Mm-hmm. So reinventing upon themselves constantly, but they stay at that level where they don't lose their position. In other words, each iteration is better in its own class. Mm-hmm. They're not going to have an iteration where they stagnate or they drop below par, for example. So just as a simplistic illustration, Lego, for example, there's other brands, Duplo, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But we all that do this purport to do the same thing, and essentially it does. But there's a quality aspect that we've come to know, trust, and expect with Lego that we don't expect with the other similar brands, because you kind of think, okay, well, I'll buy the other one because I can replace it if it gets lost. Whereas Lego becomes an investment that you don't buy to lose parts or think, oh, well, I can just replace it. You buy it as a long-term investment because you trust that brand.
Right. And it's interesting because Lego, as you were talking, I was thinking about this product that, where it's almost gesture-like. They've created a slipper for parents so that they don't step on the Lego parts and, just kill their feet. But it's sort of this understanding of the play and the creativity, but then the interaction of other players in that story that might have a negative connotation, which is a joke. Parents know all about stepping on the Legos, but they've kind of added this element of humor. So once again, borrow from all the, kind of different archetypes and ways to nuance different messages at different times, but recognize what your audience sees you for primarily, and then build your story, add those nuances with this kind of archetype as a center to be approaching your brand. So this has been a ton of fun, and I always think it's fun to try to stretch our imagination and think a little bit differently about things. Perhaps I'm, well, I feel maybe I'm a creator too, a jester and a creator all in one. But I think the takeaway is that brand archetypes are tools that you can use to leverage your communications. Understand what your target audience's wants and needs are and how you can solve those problems, but choose a way that tells your story, and in one of these archetypes can really help to uniquely set yourself apart. So just to kind of connect those perceptions and those solutions that you have helps you to position your product really effectively. And I think it also helps you to bridge those gaps to communicate, but it helps you to your audience to easily identify how you're solving a particular need, or even an unrealized need that they may have, but being able to communicate that in a way that they expect from your brand, persona, and how you've put yourself out there. So hopefully this has been interesting and something fun and a new way to think about your brand and how you can help to position and communicate, less from tactical, but more from that play, that strategic, that how would someone play with my brand? How would they see it in a story? How would what character would my brand play in our target audience's ultimate, life? So this has been fun.
I had to laugh, Nancy. I was trying to remember now where does this come from? And I can't put my finger on it now, but there's one of the brands that has this tagline, "Play with your food."
Oh yeah.
I can't remember who it is now.
I can't remember either, but I do know that.
Food in order,
Right. You know what? Well, that's also a good tip, because you want to make sure that you're connecting whatever message you're bringing forward with your actual brand, so that we can give the proper attribution to that. Because I can, because that's such a relatable, sort of an insight, because you always told, don't play with your food. And I want to say this is some kind of like Dino Bites or something like that. But I think it was more about like playing with, like, trying new recipes and things like that. I wish I knew, because I could speak more eloquently about it. But it really is this concept of like, have fun. Play with your food. We encourage you to do what you haven't done previously. Yeah, like enjoy it. And so it's a great example of a concept that goes counterintuitive but gets people's attention. And you obviously remembered that. So we just have to make sure, I would say a takeaway would be, make sure you're tying your brand name with those attributes that you're bringing forward for your target audience. But that's a great one.
Absolutely. And that's what the show is all about, is helping you make smart branding choices so that your brand becomes relatable and memorable. Because, who doesn't want that?
Absolutely.
It would be amazing if people think of something and they think, well, that's the go-to brand for that specific thing. And, we all want to be that.
Yep. And regardless of how big or small your organization is, your brand is, you can leverage these concepts and take the time to think through it. Give yourself permission to play, to have some fun and get to know your brand. Like, pretend they're a person, get to know them, and how people, how you would be introducing them at a party, or what type of party you'd bring them to. Maybe they're not a party type, maybe they're stay at home and watch Netflix type. But just to understand who they are is really important, so that you're communicating that, so that the right people that want to connect with your brand are attracted to it.
Absolutely. Any final words from you before we close?
I think it's just keep open and have fun. I think that's the takeaway for today, is to have some fun And the more you do, the more infectious it is for your brand. So what you will, what you're bringing forward and thinking about for your brand is going to be the way that people connect with you.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. If you are watching the show live now and you only caught part of it or the end of it, you do really want to just rewind and watch the beginning of this video. There's just been so much information in there. If you are a small business or thinking of starting a business or you're a solo entrepreneur, I promise you there are things in this particular episode that you may never have thought of while you are looking at crafting your marketing or your branding experience. So do go back and watch it all the way from the beginning. There's lots of takeaways, lots of gems in this. So a huge big thank you to everyone, whether you've joined us on Facebook, on LinkedIn, over on YouTube, on Twitter, Amazon Live. It has been amazing having you join us today. And again, I encourage you to go and catch the rerun if you missed the entire show. Some awesome tips on marketing and branding in this, but all the episodes have got huge stuff. I promise you, this one to me, as a novice to this whole thing, is kind of the bedrock of building your branding or your marketing on it. This is kind of need to know stuff.
Yep.
So thanks very much, everyone. This was awesome. Take care, and we'll see you on the next episode of Beyond the Logo. Going live on video makes you visible, and so the next time someone needs goods or products or a service, they're more likely to go to someone they've come to know, like, and trust. So go live on video and get people to know, like, and trust.